Awesome. We have the Skorys here on Creator Logic today. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome. I'm excited that all of you are here. Usually if it's a group, there's like one person that shows up, but like we've got all four. That's great. I'm sure you all have a bunch of different opinions on things, so that'll be interesting to kind of break down. For the audience, would you tell us a bit about what it is that you do on social media? What is your content? And then let's kind of dig into what your business looks like.
Absolutely. Can I take it away?
So we primarily started off on YouTube, and this was 12, almost 13 years ago at this point. So our origin story is that we were like the kids that would make videos at home. So a lot of our initial videos were just home videos that we were making. And this was pretty much like the beginning of YouTube-ish era.
Yeah.
I remember like, what were the top channels at the time?
Fred.
Smosh. It's very much that side of
Some YouTubers, current YouTubers don't even know about.
Yeah, Ray William Johnson was the biggest.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, we like making videos. Could we publish these on YouTube and sort of see what happens? And our very first video that we had posted was a little sketch with our cousins that was called like A Very Scary Sleepover. So this was us all still as kids. They were the youngest.
Yeah, I mean, I was probably 9 in that. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
very young. And honestly, that video didn't even have the intention of like seeing the light of day for other people. We more uploaded it on YouTube so that our cousins who lived far away could see the video when it was done being edited, because we didn't get it in time. So it was like Thanksgiving. So we were like, oh, they didn't get to see the video. So we ended up putting it on YouTube, and then we were like surprised that other people that weren't our
people
cousins,
watching it.
yeah, were watching the video. And that's kind of when it snowballed into the like, what if there are some people that are enjoying this? Where could we maybe take that?
Because that video ended up getting like, we were expecting it to get a few views from our cousin, but then slowly watch it be like 50 views, 100 views, 1,000 views. It wasn't like we didn't know that it could get views, because like I said, YouTube had already sort of been established. There were these first creators, but this was sort of our foot in the door where we're like, okay, here's a couple people that are watching these videos that seem to enjoy this. So we just kept going with it. We're like, okay, let's try to put together a series that was born into the Skorys, which was this sort of sketch Disney Channel-esque version of our life that we just committed to doing weekly videos with. And fast forward 13 years later, it's turned into a studio, it's turned into a business, it's turned into social media consulting and products. And it's been a wild ride since then.
We started more on the kind of like sitcom style. Now, today, our main channel, The Skorys, focuses on what we call adventure vlogs. So it's vlogs with a thematical theme to them and a bit of fantasy horror tied into it. So very Scooby-Doo in real life type videos.
Adventure vlogs. Are these scripted?
Yes, so they're scripted, but they're filmed very vlog style. But we usually have a storyline that spans over multiple episodes into like what we have are like seasons, and that will have us as different characters. We'll have different villains that we're kind of like trying to conquer throughout the episodes, but they're done in our studios in a casual setting, so it feels almost on that border of like, wait, is this really happening to this family? You know, like, is this really this kind of adventure that they're happening to record for us? So it's a really fun blend of reality and fantasy.
That's awesome. And so how would you characterize the demographics and psychographics of your audience? Who is watching your series?
We always say our core audience tends to be young tween range, so that 11 to 13-year-olds. Our core demographic, we have a lot on either side of it, spanning older and younger that just really enjoy the videos as well. But we definitely have also a female-based audience.
It's female skewing.
Yes.
I was going to say, anyone that leans into imagination and storytelling, which tends to be kids, but we see that across the board, because at the heart of what we do, that's what we try and target. It's that imaginative storytelling. Just happens to be in a format that works really well for YouTube.
That's interesting. So YouTube has been kind of a roller coaster for content with like a kid's audience over the last decade, right? Like, you know, with the adpocalypse and all that, and, you know, the YouTube Kids app and all that. So I'm super interested in hearing about what some of those bumps that you might have experienced there are and how you've navigated them.
I would say we were pretty unaffected through most of it.
Very, very fortunately, that was something that we didn't have too much issue with. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we are all older. So when that was happening at the time, both Eden and Cole, as the youngest of our group, were adults. So we didn't have to have any sort of issues of having children in our videos.
Yeah.
Luckily, they looked young, so from the audience perspective, they're like, "Oh yeah, like you're just like us."
And we were never really fully in the kids' space of doing Elsa videos or like the Spider-Man stuff, which was most of our colleagues. We knew a lot of people who were completely effective and pretty much wiped off of YouTube as a platform onto YouTube Kids. We maybe had like 2 videos that we did as like spoofs of those videos that got removed, but we were very fortunate to
and I think even during that time, we even leaned a little bit more into our 13-year-old demographic. So again, we definitely did skew away from some of those younger topics where we were a little more concerned that those could be flagged for things. And so we kind of took that as an opportunity to not really age up, but definitely lean a little bit more into that, older side of our audience.
To make sure we're thinking about the same thing. We're both thinking about, I don't know, this was maybe like 2019 when YouTube had some drama with certain videos that were kind of controversial because they were like, are these really kids videos? And they had like kids in them and it was kind of sketchy. And so they basically created YouTube Kids, or they had already had YouTube Kids, but they prioritized YouTube Kids for kids content. They actually removed a bunch of channels and content and moved them over to YouTube Kids. So you couldn't really monetize if your audience was kids and you were creating a certain type of content on YouTube. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, and a lot of those videos were kind of targeting that age group that was automatically just watching whatever was kind of playing next for them. So a lot younger in that like 5 to 8-year-old range, where they would just sit down and just kind of whatever was the next video was what they were going to watch. And that's where they were falling into that kind of sketchy area where it was like, from the outside, it seemed super exciting to them because it was the characters that they loved and were familiar with. But then as you actually were watching the videos, you're kind of like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't quite what, a parent would want them to be watching. Versus we have always kind of targeted the audience that is specifically searching out content. They're old enough to be like, this is what I want to watch. They're looking for
fantasy.
Yeah, they're looking for fantasy. They're looking for something scary, but not too scary. They're the ones that could be watching Netflix if they wanted to, but they're looking for something with more connection, something they can relate to a little bit more. So that was kind of the difference between our sectors.
The 2 specific events would be, for us in the kid space, what we refer to as Elsa Gate, which is, I think, what you're talking about. And that was this breed of content that was really not kid appropriate. And a lot of advertisers actually left YouTube because of that. And it tanked a lot of kids creators content. And then the second big one is the COPPA legality side of things, which was videos that were targeting kids under 13 with targeted ads. And then that also affected a lot of creators.
Especially if they had kids in the content. Because I think it was very blanketed. If you had children under the age of 13 in your videos, yes, you're targeting kids and you are a kids channel. No questions asked, because there's a whole legality of like filming kids, working with kids.
When this was all going down, you actually changed your strategy, started leaning more into like content that you knew that your 13 plus audience enjoyed. Did your strategy shift once things calmed down, or was that a permanent shift?
I think it was a permanent shift. It would just kind of be in general, if we just saw on YouTube, like, oh, hey, like, it's kind of trendy to be making videos about like these themes that kind of did skew a little bit younger, just kind of as like trying to be like, oh, if people are searching for these and this is kind of rising up as a search term. But we kind of stopped relying so heavily on other IPs in general for our content, just kind of as we got a little bit larger as well.
Yeah.
So you largely shifted away from using third-party IP and focused on your own developed IP.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's almost like those IPs were like markers for who the audience was, like Elsa, Disney, children. So anyone making Elsa is like, oh, that's maybe a kid's thing. So you're like, well, if we have our own IP, it's our IP. We don't decide who watches it. Like we're making our own content, and it's like they can't really algorithmically decide yet. Anyway, who knows one day where AI is going. But like right now, they can't watch a piece of content and say this is definitely for kids, unless it's using Disney IP or something like that. Yeah.
Right. So if we use IP, we tended to be more generic themed. Like Wednesday, obviously, is a show that's skewed so broad in terms of the demographic, and like Coraline, same thing, where there's younger kids who enjoy Coraline and the creepy part of it. And it's still recognizable, but without being super easily flagged.
Super interesting. I love this. I'm learning so much. Okay, cool. Let's dig in on the socials and the business. So we'll start with the socials. I found you guys on TikTok, YouTube. You have a group Instagram, plus each of you have individual Instagrams. I saw Twitter, X, Facebook. I found a website where you have merch, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Are there other socials that you're on that I didn't cover?
No, I think if anything, the opposite of some of the ones you found are pretty much inactive. Those are the main ones. We really don't do anything with Facebook or Twitter/X. So our main ones would be Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Occasionally, I think our mom used to run our Facebook. If she gets bored, she'll post something on there for the other parents.
Well, now I kind of want to leave that in. I might leave that in.
The fact that our audience is a majority of kids, like Facebook, just really isn't a strong touch point for them.
Totally. So you started on YouTube. That's your second biggest audience. TikTok is your biggest audience. I imagine in part that's just because like the TikTok algorithm is just much better at growth. How does your revenue break down by social platform? Like, is YouTube your number one or is TikTok your number one? And include everything, right? Include like merch sales and brand deals and an ad rev share and all that stuff.
I think it depends on the month, but as a general statement, YouTube definitely is the biggest portion of that breakdown. If we're talking like Q4.
Yeah, definitely YouTube is our number one.
Could you put some like percentages to that? Like if we were to break them down across like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok.
Are you talking specifically social or including merchandise in that breakdown?
Including all revenue sources like merchandise, but like driven by which socials, right? So like is your TikTok audience buying your merch or is like mostly your YouTube audience? Same thing, like are brands coming to you for TikTok or is it mostly for YouTube? Or
We'll just like trickle down.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of ways it flows. So why don't you start with YouTube and what that looks like from the ad standpoint?
Yeah, so YouTube would be the biggest one. I think that's where our most engaged fans are on the platforms. So it goes through YouTube and then I would say predominantly through YouTube to our Shopify store. So we would push any new products on our YouTube platform. And then we have the YouTube shop bar underneath the videos as well. So that's really our main pillar of the breakdowns for all those revenue funnels.
And it's interesting too, because that was where we had started, was on YouTube. So obviously from YouTube, you have the ads that show in front of the videos, which is the pre-rolls, post-rolls and whatnot. But we wanted to kind of take that. And like we mentioned with not leaning on other IPs, we definitely built up a lot of really strong IPs related to our personal brand and series. So a lot of that stuff tied into products and books and apparel that had to do with the content, but that's very much tied to our YouTube audience. So it would be hard for somebody who didn't necessarily know us to hop over to our shop if they weren't already fully integrated into what we call like the Skorys Universe, because a lot of that stuff is tied
There's
to that.
specific characters,
Yes.
And that
specific
has-
villains.
Right. Very strong crossover between those two, which is like intentional from our standpoint.
Yeah, we essentially wanted to create a direct jump over to be like, if you love watching this video, then you're going to absolutely love the products because they're basically our videos in real life. And especially since we are targeting that younger demographic as well, we wanted products that their parents would be okay with them buying. So instead of kind of just being like, oh, here's some random things to ask your parents for, being like, what do parents love to have their kids have? Books, activity kits, things like that. So that way it's more of an experience for them as well. But pretty much everything on the shop directly ties to our videos and having that tie with that.
Is your merchandise at your shop the majority of your revenue or like, well, we're skipping forward. Hang on. Let me just close the loop on the platform. So you said YouTube is overall 60% of revenue. That includes merch and ad rev share and all that stuff.
We would say 60% not including merchandise.
Let's include merch.
Yeah, probably 70 to 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how would TikTok and Instagram break down? I assume Twitter and Facebook are zero.
Yes.
Yeah, Twitter and Facebook are definitely zero. I would
Honestly,
say Instagram is probably pretty low too. I think TikTok would be the secondary source on the social platforms with brand deals and then the abysmal creator fund that they have.
Okay, so like if I said 80 for YouTube, maybe TikTok would be like 15% and Instagram would be like 5%, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
would we even say that Instagram's 5%?
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
occasionally
'cause
we
we've
get
had- we do
like
have.
one
Okay.
Instagram thing. Yeah, every once in a while.
I would say a little less than 5% because I will say it's very rare that we will get just an actual Instagram brand deal versus it being included as part of a package. If you had asked us like 2 years ago, Instagram would have been a lot higher because they had their own Reels fund that you could actually make money from. So once they got rid of that, then we had kind of stopped pushing as much and then jumped over to focusing more on TikTok. And then I think in the brand's eyes, still they see TikTok as the main source for brand deals.
Okay, so I'll say 80% YouTube, more than 15% TikTok, less than 5% Instagram, and then 0.
I'd say as far as our brand deal splits, and that's working just directly with companies to make integrations into the videos, that would lean towards YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay, then let's talk about the specific revenue sources, right? So like ad rev share, I would include in that like AdSense, I would include TikToks. You know, they had the Creator Fund, now it's the Creativity Program, which I've heard is actually better than it was. But like, I'm curious how you found it. What percentage of your overall pie is the ad rev share? And then we'll go through it's like brand deals, merch, and then I found some other stuff from you as well. You mentioned consulting. I saw Cameo, that kind of thing.
I would say AdSense probably encompasses probably close to like 60 or 70%.
We did pretty well with brand deals last year, and also the merchandise has been very
Yeah.
successful. Like if you consider that all as part of the YouTube umbrella, I think I would say closer to 60.
And then brand deals and merch, how do those break out?
I would say probably pretty evenly split between those, so another 20%.
I saw you have a Cameo. I saw you had a song on Spotify. Are those like meaningful source of revenue?
We had a Cameo. We keep trying to shut down the Cameo account, and for some reason it keeps popping up. We had transitioned that to our personal website, so that's still directly through us, and we umbrella that under our merchandise now.
I think Spotify was pretty, I mean, for what it had done, like we had done one song, 1 or 2 songs on the Skorys, and then it was good enough for the one song, but it's not anywhere.
Yeah.
We don't put it on our revenue charts yet.
That might pop up in a year or two.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll do less than 1% Cameo, less than 1% music. What about consulting?
Consulting's a big one that has popped up. Like in terms of the grant total, like currently right now, it's probably close to like 40%.
Oh, really? Even like including ad rev share, brand deals, and merch?
Yes.
Wow.
Because it pays so much more, especially when you're working with
Big
a very
brands.
large company
Yeah.
that needs a lot of help with social. They just value it so high. So it has been an interesting revenue that we've sort of been like, okay, let's put a little bit more attention on this because it's been so lucrative for us.
It's a newer endeavor for us, and so that's something that we've started going into this year that we've been very excited about, seeing that return in terms of being able to share our expertise, especially when it comes to social media, and that it's been something that we're definitely like, as we're seeing that, we're like, oh, okay, like, so this is what that looks like. This is how we can factor this into our business. This definitely is a viable option of kind of building this out further and looking more into it as we continue our growth.
I'm going to come back to the consulting piece because that's super interesting and I want to learn more about that. I saw something about Disney. Like, do you guys have a TV show?
We don't have a TV show, but we have worked really closely with Disney over the past couple of years. It's interesting working with Disney, or at least how we've worked with them, on their social side of things. So usually when they have launches or events and they're looking for influencers to be a part of that, they'll lean on a group of influencers that we've been fortunate enough to be like included in. So whether that's like Disney cruises or
Park experiences.
From a revenue breakdown, that has mostly just been experiential. Like they will completely spoil everyone that they work with. But if it's part of their internal team as opposed to working through an agency, from our experience and even other creators we've worked with as part of that, they don't typically pay
Save for it, right?
in a monetary standpoint. Like we've done the math and calculated it up, and it's definitely on their books, but it's not an actual like integration in the sense that they're paying us for something.
Got it. Okay. So that's not really a revenue source.
Oh, we got to spend a week at Disney World completely all expense paid, and
Right.
got to go there before the gates open type of thing.
Okay, cool. So then I want to rebalance this a little because right now I'm at 140% between average consulting, brand deals, and merch. So
I'd say if you're going to include the
consulting, we can bring
'cause I was
ads
just
down.
thinking just our
Yeah,
social
I
stuff.
forgot.
But yeah, if
well,
you're
I think your
exclude-
socials probably drive that, right? Like, do you have clients that come to you through social?
No,
Well, I think because of the social, like, yes, I don't think that it exists without
Right.
our own personal success in
Yes.
socials.
Right.
So I think it would stem
Yeah,
from it.
okay.
It's not a direct correlation.
So I
Yeah.
want to include that because I think that is an interesting opportunity that creators, especially like creative creators rather than like business creators,
Oh,
should
yeah.
still think about.
for sure.
Ad rev share 50, consulting might be 30, and then brand deals and merch would be 10 and 10. So 50, 30, 10, 10.
Yeah.
Cool.
Perfect. Okay. I want to dig into that consulting piece because that is interesting. So you mentioned that you work with brands on social. What does that exactly mean? I don't know if you can mention specific clients, but if you can, would love to know what kinds of clients you're working with. If not, how they've reached out to you or how you've found them, and like what does your kind of engagements look like?
Essentially, what we offer is being a brand online and creating a community. That information is so valuable to companies with like, hey, we have this very large company and our social feels very dead. It doesn't feel lively. So we essentially would come in and then help them create that community and that brand awareness. Essentially, a group of people that are really excited and passionate about the company that want to be involved and engaged the same way that we involve our fans and audiences.
And more like traditional companies that wouldn't necessarily have any sort of footing in the social media world, that they're very just traditional, like, oh, we're consumer products, like, that's what we're used to, and kind of stepping in and approaching them and being like, hey, we would love to show you how we can help you create this online presence so you can even reach further than you are and help, like Cole said, really build this community of people that are supporting your business and products and are excited to get behind you. And we can back this based off of our years of social media knowledge and being in tune with what currently is working, what's not working, trends that are currently popping up every other week on Instagram or on TikTok and stuff.
But I think there's also just such a gap in the market with these big companies that they've been watching essentially this new group of creators come in and they attack this social media space with like so much energy, and it's so fun and it's so vibrant, and they see all this stuff going viral and they just don't understand what they're doing or how to do that. And so it's nice, and what the role is that we play is sort of this middleman where we're like, okay, you guys are this faceless company that you've built up a huge brand, but it just doesn't have a social pulse to it. It's very corporate-y in that traditional sense. We're over here as YouTubers, and what you're seeing are the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is really fun, super fast, engaging, and it feels very lively and personal. And then we just help them sort of bridge that gap with what that could look like.
And so from a deliverables perspective, how does it work? Are you actually running their socials? Are you producing the content for them? Or are you kind of just meeting with their teams?
Yeah, there's definitely different approaches. And I think each company's kind of different with what they're looking for. So specifically, they'll kind of let us know like, hey, we really want you to help us teach our internal team how to do this. Like, obviously you guys run your own business. We can't bring you on board. So like our goal definitely is to teach them kind of how we run the process of coming up with trends, finding things to be relatable on, and then teaching them how to do that in their own way.
Deliverable specifically would be a set of knowledge that we'll hand over either like in a book form or like we'll put together a whole entire guide for them dedicated to their strategy, and then even like a content calendar for a set period of days. Like, hey, here's what you're going to follow, here are the trends you're going to implement, even the internal company values and how you're going to integrate the community, all in like essentially what we call like a brand or social media Bible that they just follow.
And it's kind of broken down. And again, it depends on the company and their wants and needs. But for some of them, we might be like, okay, hey, here is exactly what you're going to post this week. You're going to create the content. But what we're looking for is this kind of story on Instagram, this kind of reel, this kind of TikTok, this kind of feed post, and really just kind of setting it up for them to be like, okay, this is your guide, and go ahead and fill this in now on your end.
It sounds like you have a playbook that you use for your own channels, and you're able to take that playbook and customize it for each client of yours, depending on their brand values.
Yeah.
Okay. And like, that's kind of cool because you don't have to necessarily come up with like a whole new playbook every single time.
Right.
Your playbook works, but it's about making the creative match.
Exactly.
And the brand match.
Yeah. We're not reinventing the wheel every time.
That's a great way to do things. All right, let's jump into the stack. So I saw you have your own website. What do you use for your website?
We use Shopify. We're a big fan of the whole Shopify system. Been a fan of it for a long time. I think we've been using them as our backend for beta better part of 5 years now.
That's great. And do you manage it yourself, or do you have like a team that does it? I know Shopify can be pretty intimidating for first timers.
Funny enough, we've had like a whole bunch of side projects in the past that have kind of lended themselves really well to managing the Shopify store. So currently I manage and built the Shopify store, but we had like a Skorys themed Minecraft server and we're doing all the coding for it and all like the plugin management. So it's very similar in terms of the blocky sort of style on the back end with the plugins.
And our skill sets.
Yeah, I was going to say, even for just in general, pretty much 90% of our operations is like the four of us. We outsource a couple things here and there, but for a majority of it, that is kind of the nice part of having the four of us with our different expertise and interests and things, that it's kind of like, if not one of us, then the other can step in and lead one of the projects.
Okay, awesome. And do you have I know some creators have text communities or email newsletters or anything like that. Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, we have MailChimp. That's kind of our thought process of our communication line to the parents for the merchandise in the store. It's not going to be as much as the kids buying the products. First, we get a lot of parents buying for birthdays or for Christmas, which is a huge season for us. So emails is definitely the best place for us for traditional, and I know it's shifting, but for traditional contact with the parents. We've had text channels.
We played around with the community, like with the text channels, and I feel like for us specifically, it didn't go over super enthusiastically. I think we got a lot of confusion, especially people when we would text, it was like they almost forgot that they signed up for it, and it was like, why are you texting me? Like, how did you get this number? Because you can see the responses that they get back. So I think we kind of were like, okay, maybe this isn't the best spot to be reaching out to people if it feels too almost invasive. Like, why are you texting me?
If anything, the closest that we've been playing around with a lot more is Instagram broadcast, which feels a lot more of a natural integration where you get that immediate text. There's a push notification. It feels more personal. We haven't fully dived into it, but we've definitely played around with it. And that seems like it has a lot of potential, and I'd like to see that definitely grow some more.
Do you program weekly emails or anything like that, or is it mostly just information about sales and that kind of thing?
Product launches.
Yeah, it's mostly informative and on a need to know basis of a sale or summer launch or a product and Christmas gifts, etc.
Stuff back in stock if it was out of stock.
Got it. How many people do you know off the top of your head are on that email list?
It's close to 5,000.
I noticed you don't use a link in bio.
Well, we're working with a company that we have a partnership with that is a competitor to link in bio.
Can you tell me about that, or has that started yet?
We recently got off of a campaign where it required a link in bio. So as soon as we hit that date, we delete it. And at the same time, we're in the process of creating a more customized user experience, which is a very cool app. I definitely can shout them out. I think it's called braid.ai. It's a little more in depth. So we're just finishing building up that. But yeah, I think probably a week ago is when we axed that product link.
It's really TikTok and Instagram are your top of funnel potentially.
Yes.
So YouTube is where your world exists.
Exactly.
And that's what's been interesting even with shorts and how that plays into it, because I think you hit the nail on the head as far as those being the top of the funnels, because those platforms are just so exploratory. People are looking for content, and so there's so much content, and it's 30-second reels, it's 30-second vertical video, and so that's a perfect introduction for someone. But then for them to sink their teeth into something, they can hop over to our YouTube, where ideally if it's the perfect kid, the perfect audience demographic, they'll hop over to our YouTube and be like, oh my gosh, there's 20-minute videos here that now I can digest and really enjoy. And then we can fold that into hey, if you like this experience, you'll also like a book version of it, or you'll also like box that has toys with those same brands that we created for you to enjoy. So we kind of try to think of that flow for the audience and walk them through that as best as we can.
Love that. What do you use to manage all of these projects and sort of stay organized?
Notion is our brain of our organization. We've pretty extensively built out our Notion for the different sectors that we have. I think that also just comes from Tyler was a coder. That was where his background lies. And then with the Shopify management and the server side of things, between the two of us, we have a pretty good system and order of flow for keeping things at the top of our to-do list. But we love Notion.
And then Slack is another big one that we use for kind of our external team, for communication.
That reminds me, you mentioned a Minecraft server. Is that live? Is that in development?
That was
A blast from the past.
that was a really great
I see. Okay.
a big part of our why we do YouTube and our channels is to really build a community at the center of it. So we have a lot of really close fans that have just become friends, like through meeting each other through the fan pages, and like fostered real life friendships between it. So the Minecraft server, when Minecraft was been popular and the public servers were a thing, we had a pretty large server where everyone would play on together, and we would hop on and we would do live streams playing with our audience in real time. So that was a really fun chapter, but yeah, unfortunately it has since closed.
Got it. Okay. Finances. I know a lot of creators, or there are a lot of these companies that are like banking for creators, credit card for creators, like accounting for creators. Do you use any sort of creator focused finance tools or firms, or are you kind of more traditional, like regular, Chase and Amex and whatever?
I think we're a little more traditional. I think the closest thing is we work with a bank that just allows multiple accounts. Like that's our big thing with our process, is having actual buckets where our funds lie, instead of like we've worked with Chases or the big banks where it's like one account. It's very hard to make a bunch of external things.
They make it impossible, really, when you ask them to have separate accounts. They're like, why do you need more accounts? But it's been really helpful for us to kind of like have it split up, to be like, this is like our operating account, this is our merchandise account, this is our savings account, so that way we can really just see things broken down.
What bank do you use for that?
Anything I would say more, what would be helpful from an audience perspective is the system that like backs it up, which for us was based on a book called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. So when we had read that, it definitely had like a completely different paradigm shift with how we wanted to manage our money. And he has some great recommendations as far as banks that work really well with that system.
But it's basically like the envelope system or like bucket system, which a lot of banks are starting to come out with in terms of like offering that on like an app base and being able to organize your finances in that way. So you're seeing everything, kind of giving an assignment to each dollar that you have.
But some banks specifically now are like, oh, we're a profit first friendly bank. And then knowing what that means helps pick the bank that works really well for like an entrepreneurial system.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I've heard of this book, but I've never.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh yeah, it
is. Even outside of our business, we each like use it to kind of our own personal finances as well, just because it does lay it out so well for you, and it kind of just answers so many of those like whys for money, and especially being younger and kind of like having to navigate that how do I manage my money kind of mindset. It definitely was a very clear picture of like what I should be doing.
Awesome. I'm going to have to get myself a copy of that. Representation. You guys are with My People Now, I believe. That's who introduced us. Are they your first managers? Have you had other managers in the past? Like, why? How did you pick them? How's it been? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because our process over the 13 years on YouTube, we were always slightly hesitant about having any sort of official management or representation. We just didn't know what that would look like, and we wanted to make sure that that was the right fit for us.
You hear a lot of horror stories.
Well, we even had a horror
We've
story.
had a couple of our own.
I was gonna say like management and even the earlier side of YouTube's like MCNs were the big thing, where it was like these multi-channel networks, and it was like I think we were already monetized at the time, but for a lot of people, that was the only way you could get monetized was signing up with this network. And we were like, okay, well, maybe we should explore that route. And we had found, I don't even know if they are still around, and I don't even want to say the name of them, but we ended up in one of those horror stories where we had talked with someone who
had big promises, and
they're also a subsidiary of a much larger network. So they kind of made it feel like we were joining this big network, but really this was during the time where it was like all these networks were splitting into little ones. And it was
a big promise is also that you're going to get like premium ads. So like you're going to be making more money right off the bat, and they're going to be bringing you premium brand deals, and getting music assets for YouTube is also really hard at that time. So it was kind of like, oh, we have approved music you can use. So they really sell it as like this big shiny thing. And I think literally our agreement was like 50% of our AdSense went like straight to them. And we were in that, I think, contract for like a year.
Well, we ended up
I think we got
ended up
out.
taking like legal action to actually,
Get
prove
out.
that this wasn't presented in the way that it was supposed to be, or it wasn't clear enough at the start of this. So we were able to break that contract, but that definitely made us very wary of representation. And it wasn't until we had met our current manager, and that was the first time. And we've talked to other management that it just didn't feel like a fit. And I feel like that would be my piece of advice is like, when you know.
Like if something feels off, it is off.
One of the things that stuck out with my people specifically is from our manager, we received like an actual personal email. Like our inbox is every single day full of, like, hey, I checked out your YouTube channel. I checked out this. I'm selling this. I want you to do this.
Hey, insert channel name.
So we scroll through those all the time. We like skim them. But I was reading this one from My People Now, and I was like, wait a second, this is a little too personal to be a copy and paste email. And then just right off the bat, like the authenticity was there. She mentioned specific videos and loved certain pieces of content we have made and like what she could bring. And immediately it was like, oh my gosh.
I also want to say we weren't locked into any sort of term with them. Like it was very much like, like, hey, like if this works for you, like it works for us. And if it works for, you guys, we want to keep working together. But there was no contract that we had to sign that was like forcing us to work with them for an X amount of time. And I think that's a very green flag when you're talking with companies, like when they're trying to like immediately lock you into something without any proof of like what they've done, that already raises a little bit of the red flags of like, okay, well, why are you trying to force me to stay with you? Like, why can't you just like work with me and prove that like we have a mutual interest in each other?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, those MCN days are wild.
I know.
Okay, cool. Overall, happy, going well. What kind of value do you get from them?
One recent one that jumps to the top of our mind is we had a brand deal that they weren't paying out the money and it was past the contract. So it's very nice not to have to get our own legal representation. Like it was nice just from our standpoint that they were able to just send in their
team,
their people, for lack of a better word, our people, their people. But yeah, it's the hands-off experience of, we're backed by their insurance and their business insurance and they can handle that and we can work on our side of things and not having to filter every single brand email that comes in.
Yeah, because even beforehand, we were solely navigating every single brand deal we had, including outreach and negotiations and contracts. So it's really nice to have them be able to, one, head that up to be like, hey, here's a brand deal. Are you interested? What would you like us to change in terms? And then be that liaison between us and the company. So that way it also kind of helps have that separation where we just kind of get to focus on the creatives, but also on the flip side, being able to have them as our own outreach where we constantly will be like, hey, we really want to work with this brand or we're interested in attending this event, and having them be like, okay, we're on it. We have contacts. We'll find people who are connected with them. If we don't know someone, we'll work on it so that way we can set up a meeting. And that's just been super helpful.
Awesome. That's Michaela, right?
Yes.
Last couple things here, and then we'll get to the lightning round. What do you use for your video production?
We love that stuff. So that's my whole stack. We switched over recently to Sony for our cameras. We use the Sony A7S IV, and then we're all Mac based. We use all the M2 chips, so we're fully silicon based. And then we use Final Cut as well because of that. And then you want to take over the actual flow chart for editing.
Well, I was gonna say, even just on top of that, another program that we love that I feel like most creators don't use because we love telling them about it if they use Final Cut is a program called Post Labs. And then that has been really helpful for us in terms of our editing because it's a program that actually allows you to hop in to the actual project that you're editing. So that way we can trade off from our own computers, hopping into different videos. Yeah, it's cloud-based.
It takes your actual Final Cut library, puts it in the cloud, and then you can access that from any device, which is really nice because that's a feature that Final Cut's definitely lacking a little bit, is like doing that file management if you're working between multiple projects.
Especially when you're hiring out editors. There's that kind of long-term, like, okay, well, now I got to get it back to you. You got to get it back to me. This isn't done. This is missing. So, like, versus literally just jumping into their file and being like, I can see their exact timeline, their exact assets, like, everything's there.
I'm surprised Final Cut doesn't have that, but that's
I know.
do you know, like, does Adobe have that, or does like none of the big software?
To the best of my knowledge, it's very tricky, and that's kind of a weak point in the system. Unless you are a centralized location where you share like a server you can plug into, it becomes tricky sharing all those. So a lot of our friends in the space will have a dedicated editor, and they will be the last person to touch their stuff. Unless they upload everything and then re-download everything. So we have like a multi-step process where we send it to an assistant editor to lay out all of the clips. So then it's nice. Then the lead editor can take it, and then we can hop into it, and everything is there. All the assets are there. And it is also integratable with Premiere, which makes me think Premiere doesn't have that feature. And it helps centralize it in the cloud for that purpose.
Any mics, any special mics that you use?
The Rode Video Pro, yeah.
Do you use anything for video uploading and distribution?
The closest thing is for a podcast is we use like Opus clips, which essentially is an AI clip. Cut down, you upload the whole thing, it captions it, and then it gives you a bunch of cut up clips. I guess on that sense, CapCut is one we use for AI captions for our long form videos.
It's like a very nice and easy, seamless captioning compared to typing it out yourself.
Lightning fast.
So you upload direct to platform then?
Yes.
Yes.
You mentioned a podcast. I don't think we talked about that earlier. Is that?
Oh, yeah. We just literally. Did we even make it go live yet?
No,
I don't
it's
think so.
Okay, it's very new.
But yes, that is launching. We have a podcast coming out called Sibling Therapy. So that's going to be like our newest endeavor of new content that we're going to be starting.
Okay, awesome. And you're using Opus clips to like just generate the shorts for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Any other like tools or partnerships or platforms or anything that you're using to run your business or produce content or anything like that we haven't talked about?
Only other thing, I guess, just in terms of like platforms, is that we really like using Upwork for finding remote roles. Like that's been really beneficial for us.
I think another one too that we found a lot of success in is niche like Discord groups, which maybe you can talk about, but we've definitely found some editors through Discord groups, which I don't think is super, like, that doesn't come to my head as the first place to look.
Yeah, specifically with creative stuff, it's such a different hiring process for YouTube editing versus like traditional Hollywood editing, which we run into where they're like, why do I have to do all these punch-ins, these weird sound effects, like it needs music and pacing. We're like,
what is retention?
Different world. So we love, like Creative Paradise is when we find a lot of people for like short form content, or even like Colin and Samir's creative Discord group we've hired through there. And even with YouTube jobs, hire through them all the time.
Oh, ytjobs.com.
Yeah.
Okay, those are like where you find your editors. So for the operations, you had said it's mostly the four of you, and then you do a little bit of outsourcing. So that outsourcing, it sounds like, is editors primarily?
Exactly. Yeah. And then we have one other employee who works with us. And then graphic design is typically outsourced.
Yeah, I was going to say for specific projects, like, for our books, we have an illustrator that we found on Upwork. And every now and then we'll reach out to her to be like, okay, we're launching a new book. Can you work on the graphics for that? Or if we're pretty good at some of the in-house stuff, especially when it comes to like merchandise. But yeah, for specialty things, we'll usually find people on Upwork.
Got it. Okay. What does your one employee do?
She's definitely a jack of all trades, but her biggest area is like production assistant / assistant producer. So for a lot of the times we'll give her the concept, and then she'll help fill out the concept and put in a lot of the ideas, and then get the video to a filming point where she'll shop, she'll get all the props, and then
set up any sets that need. A couple of our bigger vlogs will have specific sets that need building. So for one, it was a sleepover episode. So she created this really fun blanket for us to film in. Or we had like a scary, we had a scary book that we needed built. And so she created it with, paper and printing the stuff out and making that look really old and ancient. So stuff like that is very helpful. And she's here part-time.
Awesome. Creative Paradise, that's a Discord group?
Yes.
But ytjobs.com is a website, so use that website. But you also, like, Discord groups that you use include Creative Paradise and Colin Samir's Discord group.
Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely, we've found a lot more success finding people that are like YouTube or social media specific, as opposed to, it's harder on Upwork when you're just looking for video editors, because that's such a broad category. And there's a lot of corporate companies that are looking for editors also. So you just find people that don't quite get the social media side of things. And so that's what's helpful with these groups in particular, is they're usually people that want to work with other creators or in the YouTube space.
Okay, this is great. I guess the last piece then is this lightning round. It's about 8 questions. Keep it tight. What's your number one tool to save time and money?
I would say knowledge.
Yeah,
That's kind of a cop-out.
knowledge.
I think systematizing things and making it as a set process cuts out a lot of that dead space that you would be doing a bunch of things at once, and you can just be more consistent with your time.
With free money, who would you hire?
Oh.
I think more producers and creative writers for me.
Yeah, I think I would say the same. Is more people that could be in studio with us to help with the actual production.
Yeah.
I assume Mr. Beast is on the table.
I mean, Mr. Beast is actually the most common answer.
Yeah.
I should probably put a limit on the amount of money.
It's not unlimited.
A couple of people have been like Elon Musk. I'm like, okay.
We would just buy the YouTube platform and convert it to just our videos.
Yeah. I was like, that amount of money, I don't know. You can probably do better things, to be honest with you. What's contributing most to your growth?
I think that one, going back to, we've been in a very big self-development and book learning phase this year, where we're just really trying to learn as much as we can from other people that have successfully run and built big businesses.
Yeah, I would say investing in yourself. I truly think that that's the biggest way to find growth, because your growth is always going to be limited by your capabilities. So if you can push those capabilities, then you're going to find more growth.
Awesome. What strategies or habits do you swear by?
I would definitely say quality is a big one for us. I think that spreads across everything we do. Brand deals, the quality of our merchandise. There's one thing we want to uphold, is that seal of Skorys approval.
What's the biggest risk to your business?
I feel like the biggest risk to our business is probably short form content, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I just don't think in the long run, I'm hoping, I think there's 2 paths that it can go down, which is the bad side, where everything just becomes so attention grabbing and it's just about holding people for as short a period as you can in a long stream, versus, again, going the other path, which is it just happens to be a funnel into higher quality content. That's where I'm hoping the dust sort of settles. But I think there's definitely a risk of, as far as where that's going to land.
What do you wish you knew when you started?
I think, at least for me, I wish I knew that running a business is a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. I think going into it, there's just kind of this idea of all you do is make videos and the rest will just fall into place. But understanding that it really takes a strong knowledge of running a business in order to be successful in the space.
How do you think of yourselves? Creators, influencers, artists, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, something else?
I think that's changed over the years. I think it started from, being influencers. And I think as that has grown, I would personally say, at least for me, it would be business owners.
Yeah, well, I
use
would
the
say
term business owners a lot.
We also like to call ourselves creatorpreneurs. We're in the creative entrepreneurial space, which I feel like is very different than someone who's just an entrepreneur in the startup space.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I would even say that we really ever considered ourselves influencers. We were YouTubers.
True.
And then as influencers were coming up, it kind of was that distinction of we're YouTubers. That's what we do. And then, switching over to business owners.
We always stayed clear of the term TikToker. Though.
Yes,
That's one thing we're not. It's TikTok.
We're not TikTokers.
Who influences you as creators?
Ooh.
I think anyone currently in the space pushing the boundaries of what it means to be a creator, as controversial as they are, Logan Paul and KSI and what they've done with Prime is really inspiring, and Mr. Beast with Feastables and Beast Burgers and Beast Philanthropy. Those are really exciting things to see a creator doing, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. I think something that inspires me would definitely be some of my personal favorite channels would be Yes Theory, but I also have a lot of other channels that are the ones that have just somehow slid into my homepage that I actually do take a lot of inspiration from, that they're not huge creators, but they're definitely very heart driven. And it's interesting to see someone create without expectation. And I think there can be a lot of inspiration that comes from that.
I also had Matt Pat to that list. I feel like he is a very under the radar YouTuber in terms of how massive of an operation he's created. So I think what he's done is also really inspiring.
He exited his business. Is that something you guys would consider in the future?
I think it's always an option. Like,
yeah,
I think,
I think for us, we always have talked more about the term of how do we continue our business running, with us more just taking a bigger step back. So like our strategy isn't necessarily that exit, but more of just that overseeing of it.
That's something you would want to do sooner or later.
I think later.
Yeah, I think later, especially I think it also will naturally be a bit of a different phase for each of us, because even from like top to bottom, there's like a 10-year age difference between all of us. So I think just kind of as we're hitting different phases of life, it might even just be kind of a step back and then a comeback in, and like, just
one
different
person at a time.
Yeah. Different things. But I don't think immediately there's any plans where someone like is like itching to jump out.
And anything, I do think even right now in the present moment, like we are putting down steps that will probably in 10 years be, the train tracks for a more seamless, reduction in face time, maybe, like as far as what we look like from the audience perspective. And a lot of those steps, are things that we're probably putting in place right now. But I don't foresee us taking a full exit approach as much as sustainability approach that doesn't
involve our faces.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think in terms of maybe just any other generic advice, we always really like pushing ourselves as people and for the things that we like to do. Like, I think when most people think of YouTube products, like that was a big space that we try to push ourselves in. So we like work overseas with manufacturers in China and doing custom products and literally building things from the ground up. So really inspiring people to just think outside the box and follow whatever path that you want to take.
Yeah, I think just even on that, like, it's important to remember that, like, you don't have to know everything to start, but that knowledge is out there for you to learn.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to get started, that there's just a plethora of channels that completely dedicate themselves to every single tiny sector there is, and not to be afraid of really jumping into those areas.
Power.
Yeah.
That's interesting. We actually didn't talk about that. Like the products, you guys, you work directly with manufacturers. Like, how do you find them? You just kind of taught yourself how that side of business works. So you have partnerships, or
pretty much just us. Like, we've had a lot of people reach out to us with those partnerships. And then, you just look at things from a profitability standpoint. You're like, well, if we could just figure out how to jump that middleman, then essentially the whole entire world is your oyster.
And you can even just get so much more creative. So many people would come to us and we would start to talk products and they'd be like, oh no, you can only work with like what we actually have available. And we're like, well, we have ideas that go beyond that. For one of our products, Cole had the idea. He was like, what if the actual box we sold it in was a spaceship? Because it's going to be a space related book and box and products. And we were like, how in the world are we going to create a box in the shape of a spaceship? But we were able to do that with trying different things and getting different cutouts and molds and models and customizing it. Like, that's not something we would have been able to do if we were directly working with them.
Yeah, we work directly with the manufacturers themselves. So we have a roster now of the ones that we like working with and we've worked with consistently. But I think we found them just either through someone we knew or saw online that had a good experience on like Reddit, or even just through websites like Alibaba.
And like trial and error. We did one year, we did tie-dye boxes and we got, I think, like 100 different samples of tie-dye powders from different manufacturers. And we literally had to tie-dye all of them to see what it looked like when it was washed, how it looked in comparison to the color. And we literally just were, for like 10 days straight, just constantly tying different powders and different things to figure out which ones actually were the most vibrant. And then once we found the ones, we're like, okay, this is the company that we're going to go for in terms of actually ordering from.
That's amazing. You produce content, you make products. I mean, like, you do kind of all the things yourself. A lot of creators are like, oh, I'll just work with like Spring or Printful or one of these companies. But you took the steps to do it yourself because it would be, you could make better product or you could make more money, or both.
I think both.
The big thing is, like, even with Teespring, like, we work with them, and no shade to them as a company. But every single person who's ever worn our merch and come into our studio has been like, this is the softest t-shirt I have felt. You know, you just don't get that experience going through someone else, and like the print's the best it can be. And you make more money from it. So all of it's like our personal want of the best product possible and a smarter business move.
And I think we take the responsibility very seriously of what we are influencing our audience to buy, and we don't want to ever betray that trust with them. So even when it comes to selecting our brand deals, it's okay, is this something that they can actually get benefit from, or a family watching this could be able to get benefit from? And if it doesn't fit in that, then we'll say no to a brand deal. If we're like, this doesn't really fit with our core values, and same with like our products and our merch, you know, we want stuff that's going to enhance their lives and also just not fall apart after one wash. And, you know, we want them to be able to enjoy it and wear it and feel excited about it. And we've just found that that really just comes from taking those extra steps to be like, okay, we'll put in that back effort, so that way once we do bring it to you, like, it's locked, it's amazing, we love it, and we're excited for them to have it as well.
I love that. Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining and for chatting with me.
Of course, this was so much
Thank
the four of us.
you. This is great.